for Newcastle, and I call the member for Goldstein.
Well, thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I rise to speak on this legislation, and it's a great privilege to be able to speak on the National Health Amendment Cheaper Medicines Bill 2025. And of course, when you think practically about this legislation, Deputy Speaker, I think about it through the lens of the lived reality of so many Australians right now. So many Australians today are struggling with the financial pressure of finding the balance between the costs of their housing, being in a position to either afford their mortgage or their rent, going to the supermarket and being able to fill up a basket of groceries and make choices about whether they're going to be able to pay at the ATM, then go on and, of course, make other tough financial decisions, from car payments to the cost of petrol, and, of course, essential items like medicines and being able to afford to go to the doctor. At every point along that transaction journey, people are faced with acute choices about trade-offs and priorities in their life. And nobody ever wants to face a moment in their life where the choices between their health and well-being, the longevity of their life and the fullness of their capacity from being able to afford access to affordable medicines and health care. And that is always the basis in which this parliament is seeking to debate health legislation, is how we empower people, one, to take agency and responsibility for their health and well-being, but also to find the right balance so that we can make sure that no Australian ever faces that tough choice. But there is no point pretending that as part of the ongoing conversation around what is sustainable for the future of the country, that there is always a tension in doing so, because we know there are medicines that don't get listed on the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme. Not every medicine that's available is listed by the current government, despite their commentary, and nor has it been by every previous government in the past, nor will everyone or every treatment option into the future, because some are too expensive for the realities and the costs, and because of the innovative impacts that it may have and the experimental nature. So we always take a sober, balanced approach to turn around and say to Australians, we need to make sure that we're meeting you to achieve the best outcome we can achieve for every Australian, to advance Australia fair, for want of a better phrase, without wanting to be twee about it. And so the current government has said that that price is going to be $25 per script to be able to achieve the best outcome, to maximise choice and for people to be able to get access to the conditions, to medicines they need to manage conditions. And of course, the demand is real. Nobody's disputing this. We're living longer, healthier, happier lives. And in so many ways, that's a beautiful and wonderful thing. The idea that only a few generations ago that people might be taken out by conditions which can now be managed as a chronic condition, with support or access to medicines that were innovated that simply didn't exist only years ago. But it comes at a cost, and we want to support Australians to manage that cost. So the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme, which of course is part of a bulk purchasing arrangement of government, helps millions of Australians every single year go on and afford the medicines they need, to go to a simple pharmacy after they've seen their doctor and get a dispensing of a medication so that they can get the support and treatment they need, and meet it with a co-payment so that they can then go on and get the assistance that they need to be able to manage their own care pathway. And of course, it's working with pharmacies, with pharmacists, with their doctors, particularly through primary health care, not just that we get the best health outcomes for patients, though we do. In addition to that, we manage the best care pathways for patients, but of course we also reduce the overall cost for the health system and stop the risk over time that people graduate up to the tertiary system and find themselves in hospital. So we all win when people take responsibility for their lives, their healthcare pathways, and get the best outcome. That's why the Coalition has always been such a strong supporter of the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme. I remember the time I was last in Parliament, and one of the most tragic things was during the previous terms of Labor governments. and they deprioritised listings of medications on the pharmaceutical benefit scheme because they wanted to prioritise other avenues of the health system to do things like boost the pathways for unions to tax their take, but at the expense of access to medicines for vulnerable Australians. And one of the proudest things that was done over that period from 2013 through to 2022 was to increase the volume of medications, often for rarer conditions, for people who were simply left behind by previous Labor governments, for rarer conditions that often led, tragically, Deputy Speaker, to a death sentence, whether it was particular types of cancers or rarer conditions that weren't traditionally part of the mainstream. We all understand the importance of things like cholesterol medication and other types of statins and the like that are often used by Australians on an everyday basis. But when it's those rarer conditions where it can often be the difference between not just the slow corrosion of somebody's well-being, but the very difference between life and death. When those medications are able to be listed because we have a strong economy, a balance sheet, but more importantly, a government that understands that when you have those things in alignment, you have the capacity to be able to provide the health services that Australians need on the margins, you build a better nation. So this legislation is before the Parliament, and of course, when it gets voted upon and it will pass, it will be a moment where we reduce the price of access to $25 for a script, and it will mean that it will reduce the cost of living pressure for millions of Australians so they will be able to fill out their scripts. It will mean that they will find it easier in an environment where there are they'll face less pressure on their cost of living choices in the short term, but because real wages, once adjusted for inflation, have not risen for nearly 15 years, so many Australians will still not be getting further ahead. This is just an adjustment to reflect the reality that Australians are not getting ahead no matter how much and how hard they work. So yes, it gives hope, but it does not give the long-term sustainable hope that Australians need so that we can look forward to the future with confidence. The only basis you will have long-term hope for the future is if we have a change of government where we get a reckless spend-a-thon government out of the government benches and you see a return of a coalition government that is prudent, responsible and prioritises putting the service delivery of Australians first, that makes the long-term sustainability of the budget its priority and puts Australia in a position of strength and economic growth so that we can deliver the dividends to Australians to be able to afford access to the health, education services, and that includes the pharmaceutical benefit scheme, so that those who are marginalised, vulnerable or in a situation of need are in the position to be able to afford the health services that they so desperately need. Because sitting behind any conversation around access to medicines is so many small businesses. When I go around the electorate of Goldstein and I talk to many of the community pharmacies in Goldstein, when I speak to the community pharmacies of Goldstein, what I hear is the aspirations of so many small businesses. And like all small businesses in the electorate and, of course, across Australia, they're facing real and significant challenges in the current economic environment. They face problems around skills and access to labour. They face the challenges around cash flow and, of course, they pay energy bills too and rising energy costs and, of course, of regulation and of tax. Yep, all right, some pharmacists are doing okay because they've studied hard and they've put themselves in a position to be able to earn a good income. But that doesn't change the fact that they've made a huge investment in themselves and often they're the very basis of their business, Deputy Speaker, and once you remove them, that community pharmacy can disappear. So they're not just providing a good service for themselves, but for the community as well. And the expectation increasingly is not just that they're providing a service on a commercial basis, but increasingly a public service for the rest of the community, particularly through primary care. And despite the boasts of the Prime Minister, who comes in here occasionally with his Medicare card and says that no matter who you are in this country, no matter where you go, you never need anything more than that. I'm afraid the lived reality of Australians in just about every corner of this nation is that if you turn up to a doctor's GP clinic at the moment, you definitely need your Medicare card and your credit card. Certainly in the electorate of Goldstein, that's the reality, Deputy Speaker. And so therefore, so many people turn to their community pharmacy and say, is there a way you can provide me with the assistance and support? And increasingly, pharmacies are on the front line of primary care need. And what they need more than anything else is certainty and clarity for their long-term sustainability so that they can invest in their own future. People like Simon Rankin from the Sandy Pharmacy in Sandringham. He's been a long-term provider in the community and does an amazing job. There's people like Leah Bartolotta at Hampton Discount Chemist, or Lily and Avizia Jarowski at Dendy Village Pharmacy, or Rebecca Nguyen at the Chemist Warehouse in Brighton, Eric Upton at East Brighton Pharmacy, Simon Kenny and Stephen Moran at Direct Chemist Outlet in Elsternwick have made a huge investment in their own future. Leah Bartoletta and Damien Gantz from Chemist Warehouse in Elsternwick, or Rebecca Trang Nguyen, who's from Chemist Warehouse in Cheltenham. David Wong at McKinnon Pharmacy and Post Office, or Jeffrey Kirshner, who's from Ormond Amcal Pharmacy. Malcolm Cosgrove and David Zislett at Beaumaris Pharmacy, Andre Beck at Bayside Pharmacy, Yu Chung Shao from Garden Vale Pharmacy, Daniel Leon Fleischer from Priceline Pharmacy in Caulfield, Paul Carassis, who's from Seaview Pharmacy in Beaumaris, Elizabeth and Francis Fong from Bentley Centre Pharmacy, Alexander Prufus and Richard Needham from Bentley Corner Pharmacy, Stephen Zakis, Asman Haroon and John Huen from Chemist Warehouse in Bentley, Stephen Christopoulos and Connor McCanty from Priceline Pharmacy in Bentley, Kima Cho Cheng, Wang and Bin Zhao from Priceline Pharmacy, Bentley East, Paul Pham from Nelson Pharmacy, Brighton East, Alan Bernhardt from Hawthorne Road Pharmacy, East Brighton, and Michael Schapp from Sol Patterson Chemist, Elsternwick. And what you hear from these small businesses in the electorate, Deputy Speaker, are people who are backing themselves and investing in the growth of their community and, more importantly, for the primary care services in their community. And, of course, they're also new Australian success stories in many cases, people who have been part of a migration, either as first or second generation, who have invested in themselves and for the future of their community and their success. And they just want to get ahead and support others, and we should be wishing and willing them on. And I would have thought that this parliament wants to provide them with the clarity and certainty to be able to do so, just like patients need certainty from this parliament too. Because when I think about the benefits of the pharmaceutical benefit scheme, it goes so much to older patients in our community as well. So many pensioners I talk to in Goldstein talk increasingly about the trade-offs they're making around access to medicines as part of their broader challenge of cost of living pressure, particularly in managing the chronic conditions and increasingly managing the realities of comorbidities, and across increasingly multiple stages of life, where people are taking multiple medications that only increase as people get older. Many years ago, the Productivity Commission did a study which looked and assessed that around a third of a person's entire health expenditure occurs in the last few stages of their life, and it's no surprise. So people need support, they need care, and they need care within their community. And a community pharmacy provides that care and support. But it can only do so if it has clarity and certainty to provide the support that the community needs, that they have to run a viable business, and to build the relationship with the patients they so desperately need. And, of course, for it to be affordable and accessible as part of a long-term sustainable solution for our country. And the only way you're going to achieve that is if we have a change of government that seeks to achieve the best interests of economic growth, long-term sustainable budget management to deliver the future success of this great nation. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.